Hi, and welcome to Introduction to SPSS. Today we're going to look at some of the basics of using SPSS, one of the most widely used statistical software packages used in business today. We're going to look at the data set and do some data cleaning, and then we're going to get some practice at doing some data manipulations. To start with, we'll open up SPSS. SPSS is available in any one of the computer labs on campus. Okay, so when we double click on SPSS and open it up, we come to this view. SPSS is similar to Excel in some ways, but pretty different in other ways. Let's talk about those differences. First of all, in Excel we have different tabs down here, but each tab is in essence a separate spreadsheet. In SPSS we have two different tabs here. One says the variable view and one says the data view. So the data view is like an Excel spreadsheet. We have variables running across the columns. We've got individual cases or respondents going down on the rows. When we click on the variable view, this is a view that shows us the information about each one of the variables. We'll have a variable name here, we'll have the type of variable it is, the width of the variable, how many decimals we want to see, and then there's going to be a label that is many times the question wording itself, and then there'll be specific values. So we'll talk about all of these different columns in just a second. So there's two different ways that we can get data into our spreadsheet. One would be to go back to the data view and just simply start inputting data. So if we had, for example, a questionnaire, a pencil and paper questionnaire, we might have our first variable would be the questionnaire number, so kind of a respondent number, and we would type that in here. Let's say that this is respondent 1, and then we start to do the different variables, the different answers that this person gave us in their survey. So let's say they gave us a 9 here and an 8 here, and so on. Now you can see that as I do each one of these, I'm getting a little thing that says variable 1, variable 2. Let's go back over to our variable view, and we can see that the names have now been filled in as variable 1. Now something like this is probably not what we want to do. We would want to change this to something like respondent ID. Note that when we're talking about an SPSS variable name, that there cannot be any spaces or special characters in there. So we might do that, and then we might call this one variable 1, and we might call this one variable 2, and so on. We also have this column right here where we have the label, and we can put a little bit more descriptive label in here. So we might have, this is variable 1 is age, and so we might type that in here. So we'll get a little bit more practice with looking at this and understanding that in just a second. But let's go ahead and we'll get rid of this in a second. Let's go ahead and open up a data file that we're going to be using for our exercise today. And so this data file is called HP for Hewlett-Packard Computers. It's a computer study. So HP SPSS data. And so I'm just going to double click on that. And now that opens up the spreadsheet, and so it opens up our data. So again, we've got these two different tabs down here. The data view is now showing us all of our data. So we've got question 1, and then we got question 2_1, question 2_2, and so on. So those are the variable names. But if we kind of hover over any one of these, we will see the variable name, question 2_3, and then we will also see the label, which is please indicate which of these you have ever done on the internet. Book trips. And so if we want to kind of identify what the variables are, the Q8_2 is not going to be very helpful. but hovering over it, we can see what the full question wording is. So that's the data view, and let's look now at the variable view. And so you can see here we've got the names, so these are all the question names. We've got a type, and if we just click right here, we'll be able to see the different variable types that SPSS has. So most often we're going to have something that's called a numeric variable, but we can have some other things like scientific notation, we can have dates, and the other very common one would be a string variable. And so this would be an open-ended question that would be something like, you know, what one thing could we do to satisfy you more? And people would type in their answers. But again, in most cases, we're going to be dealing with numeric data. Width, we don't really need to worry about. Decimals, the default is 2. So we'll just leave that as it is. Here again is the question wording. So this is from a survey about computer purchases. And so it has a number of different kinds of questions about usage and then some satisfaction questions. So approximately how many hours per week do you spend online? And have you ever done these things? So those are all that's the question wording column. And then we've got this column right here that says values. It's very important that we have these things filled in. So if I just click on the, let me just do that again. If I just click over here in that little box, this shows us what the values mean. And it's a little confusing, I think. I think that it would be better to describe these things as the labels. We talk about these as being labels. But SPSS calls the whole variable name as the label, and so they call these values. So in our data set, if we go back and look at our spreadsheet, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as numbers in there. And so this tells us what a 1 means, what a 2 means, and so on. Imagine if those were not here, then we would do some analysis and we could look at things like, you know, the percentage of people who gave us a 3, but we don't know what a 3 means. So again, very important that these things are filled in. I actually think we've got a problem with this one because we go down here and we've got gender and it says none. There are no labels there. Let's go back to our data view, and here's all of our variables across the top. So let's find our very last variable. That's our gender, and gender is you know, if we hover over here, it'll say gender. And you can see we've got 1s and 2s. So I don't know what the 1s are and what the 2s are because whoever created this this data set didn't fill that in. I actually do know what these are supposed to be. 1s are males and 2s are females. And so let's just kind of talk about how to do that. So I just, you know, click on the variable. I click up here, and now this little dialog box comes up. And I have to tell SPSS how to label these things. And so I'm going to do a 1, and that equals male. And then I click add. And then 2 equals female. And I click add. If I was typing out something more complicated, I could click on spelling, and it'll check the spelling to make sure that those are all right. And that's it. I click OK, and now I have my value labels there. So that's just kind of how we open up a data set and how we look at it a little bit. So again, as a reminder, there are 2 ways that we can get the data into this spreadsheet. We can type the numbers in, as we did at the beginning, or we can open up some kind of a data file. In this case, what I opened up was an SPSS data file. But I could also open up an Excel spreadsheet, and it would come into SPSS, and then I'd be able to do that as well, do the analysis as well. Okay, so let's get a little bit of practice at looking at the data. And one of the first things that we're going to want to do in any kind of data analysis is data cleaning. So as I'm looking at my variables, if you look down here to question 8.10, it says, for quality control, please select 3 for this question. So this was a quality check question. Anybody that doesn't select 3, we're going to want to eliminate them. And so, you know, again, this would be part of the data cleaning. We would also spend some time maybe going through here and looking for out of range variables. You know, an example of that might be if we have a 1 to 9 scale and then we've got a 99. Yeah, probably whoever was inputting the data, the data entry person, their finger kind of got stuck and they hit the number 9 twice. And that's clearly an out of the range variable. And again, we want to eliminate those. So how do we do that? How do we start to look at the data and understand, are there mistakes, are there problems? So we know that we have at least one thing we want to look at. We want to look at for sure this quality control question. And so the best way to do this is to look at frequency distributions. So I know you've all been exposed to the idea of frequency distributions. It's a pretty straightforward topic. And the way that we do this in SPSS is we go up here to this Analyze tab. And we're going to be using this a lot. In the next few sessions, when we spend some time really doing some analysis, we're going to be mostly on this tab. We're going to do some other things today first, but in terms of data transformations, but we're going to do most of our work in this Analyze tab. So I click on the Analyze tab, and you can see there's just a lot of different statistical kinds of things. Most of these you will recognize. So comparing means, we can do things like correlations, we can do regressions, we can do some things that maybe you're not as familiar with, some things like cluster analysis, it's under this Classify tab, or factor analysis under the Dimension Reduction tab, or multidimensional scaling under the Scale tab, and so on. What I want to do here is I'm going to go to the descriptives, go to frequencies. So under this particular menu, Descriptive Statistics, I've got frequencies and then I've got descriptive. Descriptives is just going to give us descriptive statistics like the mean and the standard deviation and the range. For right now, we're going to use the frequencies. Another one we're going to use an awful lot is this crosstab. Sorry about that. Is this crosstab function. So let's just click on frequencies here. So we click on that. Up comes a dialog box that looks like this. And it has all of our questions in the box to the left. And we get to choose those. And then there'll be some other kinds of things that we can choose over here. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on the first one here. I'm going to click on the last one here. So in other words, I'm going to really select all of them. And then I click this arrow right here. And it's going to put all of those variables that are in our data set over here into the variables for analysis. Now there's some things that I can do up in here. I could do some charting, you know, click on that and do some things like, you know, bar charts or pie charts and things like that. I don't really want to do that right now. So this is really all I really want to do at this point. So I'm going to click OK, and up comes this output. This illustrates something else about SPSS that's different than Excel, and that is that there is a separate window for our output. In Excel, lots of times when you're doing some analysis, it's likely to put the results of that analysis into a different worksheet. So in SPSS, it opens it up into a new window that shows all of the output. In terms of the way that this looks, let me just kind of move this over a little bit. When SPSS does analysis of any kind, it keeps a log over here. So here's the log. It was frequencies. There's going to be a title. There'll be some notes there. And then here's all of the frequency tables that it just did. Right now, this doesn't really seem to be all that valuable. But if we sit here for a couple of hours and do lots of different analyses, this becomes a very nice way to kind of go back and look at something that we did previously just to see what the results might be. So let's kind of make that a little bit more narrow. And so here's what the output is going to look like. Approximately how many total hours per week do you spend online. And we can see that right in here we've got the labels that we've talked about, or the values. Less than 1 hour, 1 to 5 hours, 6 to 10 hours, and so on. This shows us the frequency, how many people said less than an hour. And this is the percent of people who said less than an hour based on the entire data set. So the entire data set is 374. This is valid percent. This is the number of people who said less than 1 hour out of the people who answered this question. So you can see that there are only 372 people answered the question out of the 374, and 2 people did not. So their system missing. They didn't answer the question. So the valid percent is what we're most often going to be looking at. And then this is simply a cumulative percent, taking the valid percent and going down. So I can start to look at this, and I can, if I'm doing some data cleaning, I might ask the question, okay, so is there any problems with this particular set? And the answer is no, that all looks fine. As I go down here, I'm just kind of looking down here. So these are the different things that you've done on the internet, got information about a TV show or movie. And so this is looked up information about a TV show or movie. Frequency is 257 people said, I've done that. And then 115 said that they did not do that, or they don't know if they did that, and so on. So those are our data there. We can kind of, again, keep looking for this, looking for any values that are out of the range, that are not valid. Want to point this out. These are 9-point scales right here. Do not agree at all, completely agree. So this is kind of a modified Likert scale. And we can see in this particular table, there is no 1. That, in other words, nobody gave it a 1. And so it maybe look a little bit odd there, but that's what's going on with that. If nobody, gave that value, then SPSS doesn't show that in the table. So we're going down here and we're looking at these. Everything looks okay. And now we get down to our quality control question. Please select 3 for this question. We can see that most people, 368, did select 3, but we've got 1 person who selected 1. We got 1 person who selected 4. We had 2 people that did 9. Those 9s and the 1 may be people that are kind of straight lining, just going right straight down. But nonetheless, we ended up with 2 people that didn't answer this question at all, but we got 1, 2, 3, 4 people who did not get this correct. So what we're going to want to do is that we're going to want to go in at this point and just delete those people. So those are the people that don't appear to have been really paying attention and didn't get the quality check question correct. We don't have it in this data set, but I think, as I mentioned in class, we would oftentimes have how much time it took them to do the survey for, say, an online survey. And we can look at that and make some kind of a judgment about, did they take a reasonable amount of time to do that. So again, I'm going to look down the rest of this and see if there's anything else that's out of whack, that doesn't anything else that's out of the range. We've got our gender variable now, and we can see that we have this labeled male and female, pretty evenly split between males and females. It looks like everything's okay with the exception of those 4 people who did not get the quality check question right. So I'm going to go back to our data file, and so I'm just going down here and hovering over this, and up it comes, and so here it is. So what I need to do now is I need to find those people who did not get that question right. This is a pretty small data set, so this is not going to be real hard. If it was a huge data set with thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people in here, there'd be some other tools that we might use to identify who those people are and eliminate them. For our purposes here, I think the easiest thing to do would be just to get over to the to that question. So the question is this one, I think, right there, quality control purposes. And I can just eyeball and I can see right there, there's our first one. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click right over here in that row, and I'm going to cut this. And that's going to take care of my first person. And then I'm going to keep going down here. And here's a second one. Here's a, right there, somebody gave us a 9. So again, that's somebody who was not paying attention. So I'm going to right click this, I'm going to cut that. And there's our 4. think we're missing one more. Right there. All right, so now we've cleaned our data, and we're pretty sure that the people that are left at least appear to have taken their time and done a good job with the survey. So that's data cleaning. I'll just kind of talk a little bit about what our exercise is going to be, and then there'll be there's a document on D2L that lays this all out. But when you do your exercise, you're going to take this data set, you're going to run frequencies, and you're going to be looking for anybody that fails the quality check question. And so you'll find those people, you will eliminate them, and then you will save your data file. So let's talk a little bit about saving the data file. If I just go up here and click on this, it's just going to save that file. And but this is probably not what I want to do. Is what I just did is probably not the right thing to do. What I really want to do is I want to go up here to File, and I want to do Save As, and click on that, and then this dialog box comes up, and I probably want to save this with a different name. And so maybe I'll call this data underscore clean. So that just tells me as I come back to this file that I've already cleaned this data, and then I'm just kind of ready to go in terms of analysis. This is really, really important, what I'm going to say next, so please listen carefully. We're going to want to save our work, save our data file, because the next exercises that we have to do are going to use this data file. We're going to use this data file, it's already been cleaned, and then we're going to do some data manipulation things today, and we're going to use the results of those data manipulation exercises that we're going to do. So please save this. Again, good practices is every time we save this, we're going to give it a new name, just so that if we ever get in someday, we're working on it, we realize, boy, we really messed this thing up. We've always got the previous version that we can go back to and kind of start fresh. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save here. Notice that there are some other things we can do. We can save certain variables. So if I don't want to save the whole data file, if there's some variables that I don't ever want to use again, I can eliminate those. But we're just going to go ahead and click Save. All right, so now we've cleaned our data, we've saved it under a different name, let's take a look at some other kind of data manipulation things that we can do. There's a few that are pretty common. One, we've already talked a little bit in this semester about reverse scale measures. And as you might remember, we talked about traditional approach to survey research is that you ask some questions worded in a positive way and some questions worded in a negative way. And the goal is to stop people from just kind of straight lining, going right straight down and not really thinking about what they're doing. I think I also said that we normally don't want to do that in practical marketing research. And but this is something that sometimes people will do, and so we should know how to handle this. We've got some variables down here. Let me just kind of make this a little bit wider so that we can see this a little bit better. We've got some variables down here that deal with innovativeness. Right here, starting right there, is this question that says, I like to take a chance. And if you look at how this is kind of scaled, if we look over here, 0 means that they don't know, but then 1 means that they disagree with that, and 7 means that they agree. So if somebody says to the question, I like to take a chance, and they give us a high score, let's say a 7, that means that they're innovative. I think everybody would agree with that. Somebody who likes to take a chance is innovative. Let's look at this one next. I like to try new and different things. A high score there means that you are innovative. I often try new brands before my friends and neighbors do. High score is innovative. I like to experiment with new ways of doing things. High score is innovative. So those are all pretty straightforward. But what about this one? Buying a new product that has not yet been proven is usually a waste of time and money. a high score on that is not innovative. And same thing with the one below it. If people would quit wasting their time experimenting, we would get a lot more accomplished. Those are two items in the scale that are reversed. So if we do and here's what we're actually going to do. We're going to sum these all up, and we're going to create an innovativeness measure or scale for each one of the respondents in our data set. If I just sum these up right now, or take an average of them, hopefully you can see that we're kind of mixing things. So we're taking somebody who, let's say somebody is really innovative. They're going to give us a 7 on this one, and a 7 here, a 7 here, and a 7 here. But these two, they're going to give us a 1 on. And so it really messes up our means and messes up what we're going to do if we don't reverse scale these. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually just flip these. And SPSS actually makes this process pretty easy. So just as a reminder, what we have is we got the 1s are disagree completely, and 7 is agree completely. And what I want to do is I want to change the 1s into 7s, and the 2s into 6s, and the 3s into 5s, and so on. So I just want to flip the scale. So let's see how we're going to do that. We're going to go up here to one of these other tabs, and there's we didn't really go through this, but there's lots of different tabs up here that do different things. We could insert a variable or kind of search the data for something, different ways that we can look at the data. So the data tab has some things like, we can merge files. So in this case, we could add cases. Let's say that we're doing this every month, this survey. We could add more respondents. Or let's say that we do some research this month, and then the same people are going to be tracking what they're buying. So we have their purchases for the next month. We want to add variables for those. So these are some of the data manipulation things that we might want to do. But right now we're going to look at this transform, and you can see here we've got two things that deal with recoding. We've got recode into the same variable and recode into different variables. And again, this is really important, so really listen carefully here. In almost every case, we're going to recode into a different variable. And this will become clear in a minute when we do a different kind of recoding. So we're almost always going to use that one. Let's say that we have a variable with 5 levels, and we want to make that into a variable with 3 levels. So let's look at an example of that. And let's go up in here. How many hours a week do you spend online? So here we've got 6 different levels of this: less than 1 hour, 1 to 5, and so on. I might want to do something when I look at the data of like combining these, the 1s and the 2s, and calling those kind of light users. And then maybe this kind of the 3s right here, those are maybe like medium users. And then the 4s, the 5s, and 6, those are heavy users. So I'm taking this 6-level variable and turning it into one with just 3 levels. Now think about what I'm going to do here. If I do this into the same, if I use the recode into the same variable, then I can get all done with this, and all the 1s and the 2s, we'd now call those 1s. The 3s, we'd call those 2s, and the 4s and the 5s and the 6s, those would all be coded as a 3. But what happens if later on somebody says, I really need to have those broken out into the 6 different categories? At that point, we're in trouble, because if we save this, if we recode it into the same variable, it has overwritten the existing variables, and we can't go back. So that's why in almost every case that we're doing a recode, we're going to recode into a different variable, so we still have the original variable available if we want to go back and use it. So having said all that, is that true in this case? In other words, will we ever want to take those variables and flip them back? And if so, would we be able to do it? Well, in this case, we probably won't ever want to flip them back. But if we do, we just made the 1 7s, the 2 6s. Well, we can go back in there and we can make the 1 7s again and the 2 6s again. So we could flip it back. So we never really lose any information when we recode into the same variable when we're just doing a reverse scaling. We're kind of recoding these. So that's what we're going to do here. But again, it's really important that you kind of keep these two things straight, because we never want to do that, recode into the same variable if we're talking about reducing the number of categories, because we basically will be destroying that data that the broken out data, and we'd never be able to recover that. So I'm going to click on recode into the same variable, and now I just have to find those variables that I want, those two variables that I want to recode. And so I'm going to go right down in here, and I'm going to find this is a nice data set, has a lot of very interesting things. There's some things that are not exactly the way that I would do this thing. Okay, so here's our first innovativeness one. I like to take a chance. That's fine. Find a new product that has not yet been proven. That's one that has to be reversed. And the one right below it would also need to be reversed. So I could just click this little button here and move it over there. I could also press Shift and hit that, and it kind of highlights them both. Click those over. Now here are the two variables that we're going to reverse code. SPSS again makes that pretty easy to do, so we're going to click on old and new values. Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to just simply take the value of 1, and the new value is going to be 7, and we're going to add that. And then the value that was 2, we're going to make that 6 and add it. 3s are 5s. 4s are 4s. 5s are 3s. 6 would be 2. And 7 would be 1. So I always want to check my work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 looks good. And I'm going to click continue. And then I'm going to click OK. So I've just recoded those two reverse scale variables, and then save them. All right, so that's how we handle reverse scales. So let's do another one. Let's do one where, like we talked about a minute ago, where there's maybe too many categories. So let's just kind of look at what I'm now in our output window. I'm going to go back up here to the top of that and find how much time do you spend on the internet, and here we go. So we've got 20 people who spend less than an hour, got 139, 1 to 5 hours, and so we might want to do something like, let's say that this group right here, 20, that's a pretty small group. So maybe let's just add that to this group and call those light users. Pretty big group right here, 105, and so we'll just kind of leave those alone. And then these three are relatively small groups. Let's add all those together and call those heavy users. So we're gonna recode this data. It will just make it a little bit more simple for us as we start to work with this data. So how do we do that? We're gonna go back up here to our transform, and now, really important, we go to recode into different variables, and I'm gonna click that. And here's our dialog box. It looks somewhat similar and to what we did before, but we do have a different step now. The last one, we're recoding it into the same variable, so we didn't have to do this thing, but with what this little dialog box is saying is that, okay, so what is the input variable? What is the name of the variable that you want to go in? And what's the name of the new variable that you want to come out? So I'm going to click on this, approximately how many hours. I'm going to click that over there, and now I have to name this. And so I could call this hours, and you can do this kind of thing on internet. Okay, so remember, if this is a variable name, there can't be spaces. So that's why I did the underscore. you know, we could put a label here, like a longer descriptive title of this, but I think that's kind of fine. So now I notice that I have to hit this thing that says change. And when I do that, now it shows up here. So I'm taking question 1, and then I'm going to recode that, and it's going to create a new variable called hours on the internet. So I go down here and do the same thing I just did a minute ago, old and new values, and I click on that. And there are actually some tools here that make this a little bit easier. So I could really do individually like I just did, but it might be easier to do these kinds of things that are kind of ranges. So here's a range. So remember, I want to do the 1s and the 2s. I'm going to call those light users, and I could do 1 through 2. That would be one thing I could do, or I could use this one right here, the range, lowest through. So the lowest is 1, and I just put in 2 here. And so this is a very handy thing to use when we're doing these kinds of recodes. So the range lowest through 2, I'm going to call that 1, and I'm going to click on add, and then what did I say? We're going to do the 3s. So I'm going to do that just right up here. There's no range there. It's just the 3s. So the 3s, I'm going to call those 2. And I'm going to click add. And then I can use this one down here, range through highest. So now that would be 4, 5, and 6. So 4, 5, and 6, that is going to be recoded into 3s. And I click add. So that's all I really have to do. Now I just go ahead and click continue, and then I click OK, and my output is going to tell me that so I did the recode. All right, let's go back to our data file. So we're in the output right now. Let's go back to our data file. So we go down to the bottom here, and we've got our new variable called hours on the internet. We didn't put a label right in there, so we don't really have that. And then we go over here and notice that there is no values, you know, that we have no label values here. So I'm gonna want to fix that. Let's just do this. If I don't, what happens if I don't fix this? So let's just go up to analyze, and again, you're gonna get very familiar with this particular step that we're doing. Going up to analyze, descriptives, and then frequencies. So let me just kind of click on that. And I can highlight all of these and send them back here. I could just hit reset, and sends them all back. So let's go down here to the bottom. We find our hours on the internet. I'm going to click it over here, and I'm going to click OK, and here it is. So this is what our output is going to look like if we don't put those values there. It says 1, 2, and 3. So 158 said 1. Well, what does 1 mean? So this is pretty important when we do any kind of data analysis. We want to label our output so that somebody can look at it, so we can look at it and understand what it means. So let's kind of review how we do that. We did that a minute ago when we labeled the gender. So we just kind of find this variable right here. So again, this is our hours on the internet variable, and it says none. We're going to click right over there. And what we want to do is something like this. 1 is light users, and click add, and then 2 is going to be let's call that moderate users, and then 3 is going to be heavy users. And it looks like I'm not really being consistent here, so let's click on this again and capitalize the word users and click change. All right, so if I could click on spelling, make sure I got everything all spelled correctly. Just kind of remember, if you make a spelling mistake here, it's going to be on every chart that you use with this variable, and so we really want to try and avoid that if we can. So I click OK, and now if we go back up here to our Analyze descriptive statistics, frequencies. Still have that right here. If I click OK, then now we have a chart down here that shows what the usage, what those labels are. So again, if you submit something, if I ask you to do something like this and you submit it and it looks like this, you will definitely lose points for that, because that is not good practice. Now, let's talk about checking our work and why we might do that. So let's say that you are an analyst and you are assigned to do this, and whoever's kind of laying out the analysis plan said, what we want to do is we want to put those 6 categories of internet usage rate into 3 categories, and then now I've got 120 different analyses I want you to do, and I want you to do those analyses by user rate. So you're going to have output that will talk about the light users, the moderate users, and the heavy users. And you say, okay, so you've just done the Recode, and now you sit down and you do those 120 analyses. And at some point you realize that you made a mistake in your Recode, and that this is not right. All 120 of those analyses are wrong, and you'll have to go back and fix it. Now, I am really sure that I did this right. I mean, that was really simple, really sure. I'm not so sure I would say that I am so sure that I'm going to bet 3 hours of my time that it was correct. So how can I check this? How do I make sure that this is correct? And I would argue that on any time we do a Recode in research, we ought to always check our work to make sure it's correct. It will take me, as you'll see, a minute to check this. And it could save me hours if it's not correct. So how do we check this? Well, we've got 2 variables. We've got the original time that's spent on the internet, and we've got our new variable. And what I want to do is a crosstab. And again, I know that you've all been exposed to that. We're going to learn how to do that in SPSS. So I'm going to go right up here to Analyze. I'm going to go to Descriptive Statistics again, and I'm going to go down here to this thing that says Crosstabs. And I'm going to click OK. And up comes my dialog box. And let's make this a little narrower. All right. And so what a crosstab is I'm going to add in a row, and I'm going to add in a column, and this is going to create a crosstab table. So I could do either one. My preference usually is it's easier to look at on the page with lots of rows and fewer columns, simply because of the width of the page. So whatever has the most values, that's what I'm going to put as rows. So approximately how many hours a week, I'm going to put that as rows. And then I'm going to go down here to my hours on the internet, and I'm going to click on columns. And later on, we're going to learn about some things up in here in terms of the cells and the percentages and statistics. Right now, we don't need to do that. We just want to see if we did the Recode correctly. So I'm going to click OK, and here's my here are my results. You can see that here's my original variable, here's my new variable, and so what I want to find is I want to see that these 2 values, less than 1 hour and 1 to 5 hours, is all in the light user category, and we see that that's true. And then I want this to be in the medium user category. We see that's true. And then zeros there, zeros there. And then I want the these 3 right here to be in the heavy users, and again, zeros up there. So now I look at it and I'm 100% sure. So again, a deliverable that we're going to want to see in our exercises is going to be this, showing that you did this correctly. All right, so we've done a couple of different kind of data manipulation things. We've done a Recode into the same variable. We've done a Recode into a different variable. We've checked our work. Let's go back and look at our Innovativeness Scale and do one more thing today, and that will be another kind of data transformation. So I'm going to go back to my data file, And if you remember, we have these variables right here, and I'm just going to highlight these. Oh, I guess I can't do more than one. I like to take a chance. Buying new products is a waste of time. People would quit wasting their time. Like to try new different things. All the way down here, do I like to experiment with new ways of doing things? That's a pretty well established innovativeness scale. And the way that this would most often be used is that somebody would be given this scale, these 6 questions. We would just simply add those up, and that would be our innovativeness scale. So each person would have a score, and that score would tell us how innovative they are. Think about this for a second. What's the lowest score that somebody could have? So there's 6 items here. It ranges everywhere from 1 to 7. So the lowest score somebody could have would be a 6. And then the highest score somebody could have would be a 42. So if somebody gives us all 7s would have a 42. So how do we do this? How do we add up all of these individual items to create a new variable? Well, again, we're going to go back up here to this transform, and we're going to click on that. And right at the top here is a function called compute variable. So again, SPSS makes a lot of these kinds of analyses very simple to do. So I'm going to click on compute variable, and up comes my dialog box. And we want to do something like, we want to give this a name like innovativeness. And this, and again, if we do multiple words here, we can't have any spaces there. We have over here all of these different functions. So you can see, let's just kind of look at all of them. We've got all of these different kinds of functions that are over here that we can do some obviously pretty sophisticated kinds of things. Most often you'll be using things like something like this, the mean or the median, or we might ask for the max or the min. And so on. So there's lots of different things we can do. And one of the ones that we can choose out of this is something called sum. And so I'm going to click on that right there. And when you click on any one of these functions, it's going to tell us, what does this function do? So this returns the sum of its arguments that have valid, non-missing values. And so now that this is highlighted, I'm just going to click this up here. And you can see it puts this numeric expression up there. It says sum. And then this is the way a lot of these things work in SPSS. There's going to be some parentheses and then a question mark, comma, question mark, just showing us that we're going to put a variable where the first question mark is, a comma, and then the second question mark is another variable, comma, and we keep doing that. So what I'm going to do is put my cursor right there. I'm going to delete both of those, all 3 of those things, so I just have the parentheses. And now I simply have to find my variables that I want to add up. So I'm going to go down here and find that. I like to take a chance, so that's going to be our first one. So question 10_5. So I just click on that, and then I click this button over. And now, really important that I put a comma here. You'll get an error message if you don't put a comma there. And then I click on this, and I put that over, comma, click on this. Okay, so I think that takes us all the way down here. Like to experiment with doing new things, and then the next one is, kind of an opinion leadership question. So here's my my set. Want to kind of look at this question 10, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got my commas in there, and should be all set with that. So this is, when I click OK, this is going to create a new variable that's simply going to add up people's scores on these 6 items and create a new variable. So I'm going to click OK, and it says that it did that. So how would I maybe look at this? I would go to maybe analyze. Let's do something different this time. If we did frequency, well, let's do frequencies and just see what that looks like. Gonna get rid of this, and down here is our new variable, innovativeness, and I'm gonna click over there, and if I just click OK, so here's my frequencies. So there was nobody that gave us ones on everything. So the lowest score is a 10. They gave us ones on almost everything, and there's one person there. There's 11s, and then it goes all the way up to we've got 11 people who are pretty innovative and gave us a 7 on everything. So that certainly be one way of looking at the data. Probably more likely we might want to look at something like this, descriptives, and then the next one down, descriptive. So this is weird. Descriptive statistics, analyze descriptive statistics, and then descriptives. So we click OK there, and up comes our dialog box. Again, we can kind of find that variable. It's right down here at the bottom. Click on that and send it over. And then there may be some options here we might do. So this is showing us, well, what are we going to get? Well, I'm going to get the mean. I'm going to get the standard deviation, the min, and the max. Those will be the pretty common ones. I might want to, look at the distribution a little bit if you wanted to look at any of those. So click continue, and then I click OK, and then here it is. So we have our innovativeness scale. 368 people answered that. The minimum was 10. The maximum was 42. We just saw that. The mean was 30.1277, and here's the standard deviation. So that covers what we wanted to do today. And just as a recap, we've learned a little bit about how SPSS is set up. We've learned a little bit about how we get data in. We've learned how to do some basic data manipulations like recoding into the same variable, recoding into different variables. We've looked at how to do some basic analysis like frequencies and crosstabs and basic descriptives. And then we learned how to create a new variable by summing some existing variables. On D2L, there's a document that describes what you're going to be doing for the next exercise. Note that the next exercise is worth 20 points. So there's kind of a lot of data analysis here. So it's a little bit more involved project than maybe some of our other exercises have been. So let's just kind of summarize by talking about why are we doing this. You all, I think, are aware that data analysis has gotten to be a very important part of almost every area of business. One of the kind of strategic initiatives of the Broad College is to make sure that students have more basic data analysis and data manipulation kinds of skills. And so that's what we're doing here. We're learning how to take a data set, do some manipulations of it, do some analysis of it, and then as we kind of go on, we're going to learn how we can take this output that we're getting from these statistical analyses and be able to interpret them, and then perhaps maybe be able to make some recommendations to managers in their decision making. So that covers our first part of SPSS, our introduction to SPSS. Good luck.